Good morning, everyone. Leadership, we're all called to it, a particular type of leadership, and it's really unfolded quite clearly in the baptism of the Lord. It's the feast that we celebrate today. What type of leadership? One word, and we'll look at that in just a little bit, but I want you to think about it. What is that one word of that type of leadership that Jesus is calling us to? I'm going to ask the question. Maybe some of you will be brave enough to shout out and answer. Maybe you'll be wrong, but maybe you'll be right. We'll see. Now, let's review quickly from last week, and it was the Deacon Philip Sabo. Wonderful homily and a great exegesis or an unfolding of the Scriptures, and he gave us hope. Every single one of us here has a relative or a close friend who is away from the Lord. And now I'm not saying that this individual, our beloved, doesn't do anything good. I don't say that they're not loved by God. All are loved by God. But what we desire is that they know the fullness of the love of God and of the clarity of the truth, that they would come and that they would experience the embrace in the Eucharist that God wishes to give every single one of His children, that they would know that embrace. And a true embrace it is. And an embrace that is true and loving fills us, strengthens us, so that we go out. That we go out really to be able to do what we have to do, the difficulties, the challenges. But when we're filled with that the experience of love, we're more apt to be courageous and to do what we're being called to do. We're do what we're being asked to do by the Lord. Really, as St. Irenaeus says, the glory of God is the person fully alive. That's what we want. And without the embrace of the Eucharist or the clarity of the truth, yes, they can live life, but they're not going to live it as fully as really the invitation is given. So we deeply desire, we have this hope that they would come to the Lord. And as the deacon unfolded, the Magi, who were very much away from the Lord, they might have been seeking the truth in some regard, but they certainly weren't in an understanding of the covenant relationship that God had made with His people. They didn't know that God was a personal God and a God that wanted to be in relationship with them. All they knew was, that God existed, that God was powerful, that God was intelligent, and that they weren't God. Okay? Those are 4 good things to know, by the way. All right? God exists, God is powerful, God is intelligent, and you and I are not God. So they had some understanding of the truth, but they were certainly away from God. They were so far away, and yet they came to a realization that Jesus Christ is the Messiah. We have hope. We have hope that God is at work with our loved ones, bringing them to Himself. So let's hold on to that hope. Let's continue to pray. And also say, all right, Lord, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to invite them into my home? Do you want me to invite them to church? Do you want me to invite them to confession? Do you want me to step forward and say this kind word? Do you want me to confront them? Do you want me to shut up? Sometimes we need to. What do you want me to do in order to be a vessel of grace for their epiphany? Excellent sermon. So much to look forward to when Deacon Philip becomes Father Philip Sabo this May. Now, we're celebrating today the baptism of the Lord and unfolding a certain type of leadership. Blank leadership. Do we have anybody courageous out there? Anyone? What type of leadership? One word. What is it? What's God calling us to? Aha! Servant. You were listening to the homily in the previous masses. No, just joking. Very good. You're right on, Sharon. Servant leadership is actually what we're being called to. Servant leadership. And what that means is that we have to lead by example. That's what happens in the scriptures today. See, Jesus is a divine person, the second person of the Holy Trinity, who assumed a human nature and is perfect. He has no need of baptism whatsoever. Why is he being baptized? Well, we see two reasons clearly unfolding here. Number one, he is unfolding the fullness of the Godhead in experience and then later in the scriptures. He goes down in the water, he comes out, he's the second person of the Trinity, the Son of God. And what happens? The Spirit descends upon him in the form of a dove. And then the Father says, "This is my beloved Son." So we have this experience of the Holy Trinity with crystal clarity, the fullness of the Godhead manifested. This is the image that you and I are created in. A perfect communion of persons, the template of a sacrificial gift of self that is good, a good sacrificial gift, that brings forth life in another and in others. That's the template that he is revealing. That is the fullness of the Godhead in the Holy Trinity. He does that, and he does it in a sense that he doesn't need to do it, but he's showing us what to do. That is to say that if we're going to lead and we're going to show others what they need to do, we're going to do it first. I can't help but to think of when I was in the medical intensive care unit, and we had a great servant leader. We also had an assistant or an associate manager, and he was an excellent caregiver, very professional, but when it came to leadership, he was hungry, power hungry. And he didn't lead by example, he just told people what to do. No one really respected him. No one really did what he asked to do either. But Benny was a great leader. He was there 14, 16, 18 hours a day. He had to cover the medical intensive care unit 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And he did it. And you know, if you ever have to juggle staffing, if you have to deal with the difficulty of personnel, you know that it's the number one difficulty. And Benny led by example. There were a bunch of us that would do whatever he wanted. Why? Because he led by example. He was a servant leader. If he asked us to do it, he was already there and had done it and given us that experience. Now, I'm going to tell you this. There were a bunch of people in that work center that saw Benny's example and didn't care. There will always be people who see an amazing example and they do whatever they want. Doesn't matter. They won't follow. Now, there were a group of us, though, that were inspired by the example of servant leadership. And, you know, anything that he wanted, Benny got. Why? Because he was willing to lead by example, and we followed him. This is the type of leadership that God calls us to. And it unfolds in all of our relationships. Spouses. You expecting something from your spouse? You're expecting them to do this? Are you doing it? Are you stepping forward and being the first one to say, "I'm sorry. I was wrong"? Or are you just creating a bar? Being like that assistant manager who was very quick to say, do this, you got to do this, and you got to do this, and you got to do this, and that's a bunch of words. Are we leading by example? As parents, we're asking our children to do this, and yet, are we showing them the example? Grandparents, asking their grandchildren to do this. Children, you're asking your parents or your grandparents to do this. You should do this, Grandpa. You should do this, Grandma. You should do this, Mom. You should do that, Dad. Are you, young adult children, modeling that for your parents? Or are you just snapping the finger? If you're doing that, then you shouldn't be listened to. Jesus shows us a model of leadership, and that model of leadership is servant leadership, where we serve by example. What will you embrace?